Here we had a good turnout this morning in the early service, and if this is the first time you've been to a 4th of July week with us, I always share some of these quotes from our founding fathers, and we really always walk away encouraged about being Americans. Well, as I was looking for some people maybe I haven't quoted or very rarely, I really began to feel that the Lord was also adding some extra things to my lesson. So today, the lesson will be the story of two countries. The America that we had and the America that we now are. And so I pray that you will not walk away discouraged, but realizing that where we are, that if we do not do something, and as citizens, every one of us has an obligation. Not a one of us, if we want to call ourselves a republic, not a one of us has the right to sit and do nothing but complain. I don't care if you voted, you still don't have the right to complain if all you do is show up and vote. Then you're doing nothing but declaring a democracy, not a republic. Remember, Elizabeth Powell made the comment, or history bears it out. A couple different versions of it, but the one that I'm very familiar with, when the Constitution was drafted, when Benjamin Franklin walked out, she asked him, "Mr. Franklin, what kind of government have you left us with?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." One thing I've not shared very often is about Elizabeth Powell. At that time, all of you know there was not women's suffrage, but that didn't stop that woman. She went to work immediately. She took to heart what Benjamin Franklin said and began to encourage people to get involved, and when it's time to vote, to encourage them to vote, even though she could not vote. Now that's a remarkable statement about her, and so I will start on a good note, and then I'm gonna end it, and I hate to do it, but at least you only have to listen to it once. I not only had to put it together, but I had to preach it at the early service, and now I've got to do it again. But it's a stark reality of where we are. Before I get started, I do want to make mention two things. Next Sunday after the second service, we will be having our first meeting about Ready Harvest, which will be at South Fentress Park on September the 17th. This is more than just ham operators, so we'd love for anybody and everybody that wants to attend, and then we're going to see exactly, start working on exactly what we plan on doing on that day. Second Sunday in August is when we go to Hope's Lake. Don't forget about that. And then this Friday at the old courthouse in Jamestown, which is July the 8th at 6 o'clock, there will be a town hall. So if you can at all, be there for that. So there's a lot of things that we can do. We just have to get involved on some level. And I realize we can't be part of everything, but we all can be part of something. Something. I was reminded this morning, and I realize ever since the birth of this nation, we've been walking away from God. From day one, we've just got a little further and further away from God. I guess things got a little easier, I don't know, but anyway, it is what it is. But we still had some hope, and I believe the year was in 1954, and I've shared it with this group many times. Could be wrong on the date, That's why I'm not going to mention the president, because if I got the date wrong, I've got the president wrong. But up until that date, if you would have went to school and said Pledge of Allegiance, if you was in school in the early 50s, we'll say the 40s, and if you would have been saying the Pledge of Allegiance, it would have sounded like this: I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, with liberty and justice for all. Under God is not there. Not there. So the story goes that, and I actually, what you don't know about me, I've taken many courses in early American history from a structure of a spiritual a spiritual atmosphere or a spiritual overlook of America. From that point of view, from a spiritual point of view, I've taken a few courses, and on that morning in Washington, D.C., there was a pastor, and if I remember correctly, he was from Russia. And he had moved to America, and of course his children were going to school, and every evening when the kids would get home from school, he would ask them, how did it go during school? Well, they would tell him what went on, and always they would tell him, we had our prayer, and we had our pledge. And he thought, growing up in Russia, we also said the pledge to Russia. So what's the difference between saying the pledge to Russia and saying the pledge to America? What's the difference between the two? And through the process of prayer and things of this nature, he decided the difference was God. So he developed a sermon with that theme in mind, and there happened to be some legislators in the congregation that morning, and some stories even say the president himself was at the sermon that morning to hear it. And then they went back Monday and beginning to draft whatever they needed to do to get under God put into our pledge. It's stories like that is why we need to still be speaking of these things from the pulpit. See, unfortunately, we've taken the Word of God and we just use this as a storybook. We use it as a book to just keep rehashing, retelling the same stories about Daniel and the lion's den, or Daniel and the three friends, or Samson and Goliath. Nothing wrong with those stories. I mean, they're very important, but we don't use them in context the way that our founding fathers did. We use them as just another story, and we don't even put it in context of how it's relevant for us today. They had the unique ability to be able to do that. And because of that frame of mind, then by nature, the way they were raised and being a Christian, it came very easy for them when they started writing these documents to think about the things in the Bible that they either heard or read, whatever, and start putting it in some of these documents that we have before us today. We have such a great history. And my goodness, it's absolutely killing me to think how it's going to end if we don't do something. So let me say this with no disrespect to anyone, and especially not our veterans. But America is not the greatest nation in the world. We are not. We are far from it. And I don't say that with any pride. I say that with a lot of grief. And you might say, well, Pastor, I don't agree. Well, you just need to hang on, because, first of all, the Bible is very clear. And I love the passage in Psalms 119, 105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And I've given my definition of the interpretation of that before, that if we don't know where we're at, we sure don't know where we're going. And we've got to come to grips with where we are as a group. Because if we are a republic, by more than just a name, that means that you and I are obligated to be involved. Now, this is not just about politics, because when you read our founding fathers, it involves every aspect of our life. They brought as much God into the government as, actually they brought more God into the government that day than we bring God into the church today. I mean, if our founding fathers were to come back today, they'd say, okay, first of all, we've got to stop, because there's two things I've got to teach in the church. One in the church and one in the church and the rest of the country. For you Christians, first thing we need to do is have a series of Bible studies, because you don't even have a clue what the Bible stands for anymore. And the second thing is you're going to have to learn the Constitution. Folks, how can we even say, let's take our nation back, if we don't even know what's written in our Constitution, written in our documents? How can we make those comments? We can't. We can say it all we want to, but it's empty words. So there's a few challenges I'm going to have as I go through this. One of them is identify who these people are. The powers that be only want you to know the Jeffersons and the Franklins and maybe the Adams. But learn the Benjamin Rushes. Learn. I'm going to be talking about more of them as I go. Learn these. I've seen the demonstration time and time again that they put that big picture up there with all of our signers, and most people can only name two. A very, very, very few can name three. I've never seen anybody name over three of our signers. Shame on us. So today, with their scripture text, I look at this up here with their flag with the 13 stars, the 13 colonies. In Psalms 33 and 12, it says, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." And then I want to come back to Proverbs chapter 14, verse 34. I believe it's verse 34, that says, "Righteousness exalts a nation, but a sin is a reproach to its people." So if we believe that, so let me explain that passage before I take off in this. You and I, that are called Christians, or not, when we die, when the Lord brings us back, then we will be rewarded. If we've served Him, then our reward will be heaven. And then if we've done the works that we have done for Him, there'll be rewards for that. But in other words, these rewards come after this life. But when you look at Proverbs chapter 14, we have to understand that in this passage, blessed is the nation. Well, a nation doesn't have a soul. So a nation is not going to be brought back to life. So a nation has to be judged today, and it's judged by the laws that it has on the books. So those laws that we have will either determine whether God will bless us or we get the cursings from God. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. That doesn't mean that you might not have some bad laws, but the majority of the stuff you're doing is good and right. And God is going to bless you. But if the majority that you're doing, then we have to look at the second part of that passage, that a sin is a reproach to its people. Well, I don't know where it happened, but somewhere we left the blessings and went to the cursings. Being a reproach to the people. We are living in the reproach to the people. Sin being a reproach to the people in the United States of America. So to look at the first front of this, the blessing, so blessed is the nation, so we've got to go back. And the first one I want to talk about, and I'll give you just a little heading for each one of these people. I've got to read it. I don't want to misquote these guys. I'm bad enough for that anyway, but so I'm going to try to stick right with my notes that I copied down. So John Adams, who was a signer of the Declaration and the second president of the United States of America, said, "It is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand. The only foundation of a free constitution is pure virtue." And then he goes on to say, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." So in other words, we want to know why Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and help me, and I'm sorry if you vote for them, I just have to say it the way it is. If we want to know why that they will stand and say, "I don't care what the Supreme Court has to say," that you can go and you can threaten the Supreme Court justice that's against our Constitution law. Remember, we are not a democracy. We don't change laws by mere vote. Our legislators are there to uphold our constitutional law. We practice supposedly under a constitutional law. The reason they do that without any thought in mind is because our founders told us that these documents in the hands of evil people is worthless paper. We don't need to expect them to uphold the Constitution. There's no power in the Constitution for evil people. Our founding fathers were very clear. There were several of those of our founders that made statements that way. He also went on to say, the moment the ideal is admitted into society, that property, boy, now listen, pay attention, because I thought, boy, I'll get in trouble. I'll surely get in trouble online, but I'm not going to get in trouble in my own congregation when I say this, so I have to make sure that you hear the words. The moment the ideal is admitted in society, that property, you understand that, is not as sacred as the laws of God. Well, now if I left it there, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? I'd be in trouble. You wouldn't be in trouble. I'd be looking for a job. And that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it. Anarchy and tyranny would commence. Here he cleans that statement up. If thou shalt not covet, and thou shalt not steal were not commandments of heaven, they must be made inviolable precepts in every society before it can be civilized or made free. So what the statement he is making is true, because thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not steal. You're talking about property. You might be talking about real property. You might be talking about personal property. So he cleans that statement up. And I just wonder how much trouble he got into before they finally got that. John Quincy Adams, who was the 6th president of the United States, said the law given from Sinai was a civil and municipal as well as a moral and religious code. It contained many statutes of universal application laws essential to the existence of men in society. And then he went on to say, there are 3 points of doctrine, the belief which forms the foundation of morality. The first is the existence of God. You imagine Nancy Pelosi said that? Or can you imagine if, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, who's a good Republican that we like out here? Maybe like. Let's just say that old Lindsey Graham said it, I still wouldn't believe him. Folks, let me tell you, the Republican Party is not our answer. If you think if we can just get all Republicans in there and we'll fix this, then you're going to be most miserable. So I'm not picking on Democrats. I'm picking on a government that is completely out of control because the government, we the people, has allowed them to run amok. So he goes on to say, the first is the existence of God. The second is the immortality of the human soul. And the third is a future state of rewards and punishments. Suppose it possible for a man to disbelieve either of these three articles of faith, and that man will have no conscience at all. He went on to say, the laws of man may bind him in chains, or may put him to death, but they can never make him wise, virtuous, or happy. Samuel Adams, who is a signer of the Declaration of Independence, said, neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. Ooh, that's why our Constitution can't get the work done today. Charles Carroll of Carrollton, signer of the Declaration, says, without morals, a republic cannot subsist any length of time. They therefore who are decrying the Christian religion, whose morality is so sublime and pure, and which denounces against the wicked eternal misery, and which insure to the good eternal happiness. These guys knew, I'm telling you, they just had some type of connection with God. Benjamin Franklin, of course, he was a signer of both documents of the Constitution and the Declaration. He said only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Now, I'm going to stop and because I didn't look it up, but I'm about positive this next quote from Benjamin Franklin was taken prior to us winning the Revolutionary War. And the reason I want to pay attention to this is because we need somebody to stand up and sound an alarm. As great as these people were during their continental conventions, any of their meetings that they would have during the war, but prior to the war being over, the Revolutionary War, they would start every session out in prayer. After the war ended, they stopped praying. The Congress quit praying. So Benjamin Franklin gets wind of this. So he makes the trip. And he walks in and he says, I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, it is probable that an empire can rise without his aid. Speaking of America. We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without His concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. You stop there just for a side note. Build back better. The Great Reset is nothing but to build the Tower of Babel back. What the same concept of what they were trying to do was outdo God, be better than God. This is what the Great Reset, the Build Back Better, this is not an American concept of Joe Biden. This is a World Economic Forum and a United Nations concept. Build Back Better, the Great Reset. It's all the same. They want to do and we're better than God. So it's kind of ironic he made mention of that. We shall be divided by our partial local interest. Our projects will be confounded, and we ourselves shall become a reproach and a byword to the future ages. And what is worse, mankind may hereafter, from this unfortunate instance, despair of establishing governments by human wisdom and leave it to chance, war, and conquest. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business, and that one or more of the clergy of this city be requested to officiate in that service. Do you realize, even though it never was called officially a church because they did not believe that it needed to be a state-run church, but our capital at one time was the largest church in America. I don't know if you've ever been in the rotunda, but well over 2,000 people would gather. And they would come from everywhere. And I remember one of the people coming, and the guy that preached didn't preach but maybe an hour or two. And when he closed it up, they wanted him run off for not preaching longer. I guess if you rode 100 miles to a service, you would want more than a 40-minute sermon. Thomas Jefferson, signer of the Declaration, third president of the United States, he says, well, we're going to take this one a little hard. Give up money. Give up fame. Give up science. Give the earth itself and all it contains rather than to do one immoral act. Lie on your taxes? He said, not one immoral act. This was the mindset of our founders. He went on to say the doctrines of Jesus are simple and tend to all the happiness of mankind. And then went on to say, I concur with the author in considering the moral precepts of Jesus as pure, more correct and sublime than those of any ancient philosophers. Richard Henry Lee, signer of the Declaration, said, it is certainly true that a popular government cannot flourish without virtue in the people. Jedediah Morse, he's another dandy, he's a patriot and father of the American geography. To the kindly influence of Christianity, we owe that degree of civil freedom and political and social happiness which mankind now enjoys. Whenever the pillars of Christianity shall be overthrown, our present republican forms of government and all the blessings which flow from them must fall with them. Why do we think that we're any better? We should not expect any more than our freedoms to go away. Here's the kicker, and I'll get that in a moment. They have went away. We just don't know it. We're too busy pounding our chest. We're the greatest country in the world. William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania. It is impossible that any people of government should ever prosper where men render not unto God that which is God's, as well as to Caesar that which is Caesar's. So, there you go. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said no free government now exists in the world unless where Christianity is acknowledged and the religion of the country being Christianity. Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence. I only put just a couple little things for him because I just done a sermon on him. The only foundation for a useful education in a republic is to be laid in religion. Without this, there can be no virtue. And without virtue, there can be no liberty. And liberty is the object and life of all republican governments. And then I'm going to go on. I'm going to go to the very last one of Robert Winthrop, former Speaker of the House. And he said, men, in a word, must necessarily be controlled either by a power within them or by a power without them. Either by the Word of God or by the strong arm of man. Either by the Bible or by the bayonet. We better pay attention. Our founding fathers, they just knew something was going on. They understood. Even in our Declaration of Independence, I believe, and Lord help me, I don't know why I would even forget it, but for some reason this morning I'm struggling to remember. But in our Declaration of Independence, I think there are 27 grievances. I'm telling you, how many grievances would we have today over this government? They didn't rebel because they were rebellious people. They rebelled because they were being everything they came over here for was being challenged and eroding away. Now, I'd admit, only about 30% of the Americans in the colonies were in favor, and much less in favor of war. And the good thing about that, it doesn't take everyone. But I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody else to fight my battle for me. But because of just these very, very few, and there's hundreds and thousands of more people just the same way. I'm telling you, some of these people, if they would have lived 2,000 years ago, they might be Bible characters that we would have been reading about today. They had a tremendous amount of respect and love for God. So much so, they wanted to put it in their documents so that the people in the country would flourish. And today, unfortunately, it's all about me, myself, and I, and what I can get. As long as I'm doing okay, I'm not going to worry about it. But somewhere, this group of people started out, blessed is the nation, and now we've come to a sin as a reproach. Same country. Just 246 years later, I guess. So I've jotted down a few things I want to go over. Not happily go over. And understand if you add a few dynamics to this, you might change the percentage a little bit, and you might change where it's placed in these polls. But overall, it's still it's a terrible analysis and truths that I have to share with you. The first one I start out with is our kids. That America's children, their quality of life is decaying. And when you look at health care and education between the ages between 6 and 18, America, out of 26 developed countries, America ranks number 24th. 24th. 1 out of every 6 children in America live in a home that's facing financial difficulties. 1 out of 6. The second thing, and that in itself, okay, we could work on that, but folks, I'm going to give you about 15, and I could easily give you 100. The second one is teenage pregnancy. America has the highest percentage of teenage pregnancy of any nation in the world. Out of 1,000 girls ages 15 to 19, 57 out of that 1,000 are pregnant at any given time. You take, in fact, Europe is less than that, and I believe it was Sweden, which is the number is 8. In America, it's 57. Of our teenage girls are pregnant out of every 1,000. Don't tell me we're not under the cursings of God. Number 3, and this is why we have become one of the most dumbest people. Folks, I don't say this with, I mean, it is funny, but honestly, when I first started reading the American documents, I had to get a dictionary, and it was English. I didn't know what these words meant. We have been dummied down so much. Do you know why? Listen at this. Teenagers and reading habits. 33% of our teenagers have not read a book in the past year. Whether that's a physical book or on Kindle or on your phone, 33% of our kids haven't read a book. In the 1970s, 60% of our 12th graders would read a book or a magazine every week. Today, that number is 16%. 45% of our kids are, and they use the word almost online constantly. Now hang on to the book, because we'll come back to it in a few moments. We're going to get a few of these others out of the way, because we're going to come back to why we're not reading books. And so while I'm here, let me say this. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your family. I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kids. I don't want you to tell me how to raise mine. I raised mine the way I seen fit. And I tried, when I became a Christian, I prayed every day on what I should do as their dad, every day. My wife's job was to pray for their protection. My job was to pray what we should do in helping our kids, that as they begin to grow up, not only prepare them for society, but also prepare them the way that would keep them with God. I did that every day, never failed. Let's go on. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but make your kids start reading. Make them read. Let them start reading the Bible. Now, I used to say this all the time, and then I felt I was doing it more of a prideful thing, so I quit. Actually, not only did I quit reading it, but it even made me quit doing it for a few years, because I thought I was getting too prideful about it. But start with the Bible. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't get old. So I am going to tell you how many times I've read this Bible, because I just finished it. I believe it was week before last. 29 times I've read it from cover to cover. So start with the Bible. I'm a reader. It's easy for me. I read. Just in the last few weeks, I've read 4 or 5 books. Some of them over 400 pages. I am a reader. It's easier for me to read. I guess that's why I can write sermons, because I do read. I'm reading every day. I'm constantly reading. Let me go on, because we'll touch that again in a moment. In America, 1 out of 8 families go to bed hungry every night. That's 21.2% of the households go to bed hungry every night. 51.9% of Americans say that even though they are working, they're living in poverty. 51.9%. 60% of households, that is led by an older American, must choose whether they will buy groceries or pay their utility bills. Folks, we are under the judgment of God. And with that in mind, America is wasting food. 40% of the food supply in America goes to waste. In other words, that comes down to 1.4 billion tons of food per year is wasted. That's $161 billion. That break it down, the average person is wasting $1,500 worth of food per year. So times that by however many's in your house, and this is how much we're wasting while the nation's going hungry. So we'll go to the next one, which is TV. This is why I think we've been dumbed down. We don't read the books because of TV. Now, the average American will watch 78,000 hours of TV in their lifetime. Now, that's astonishing. But this next one absolutely took the cake. How many times have you turned on the TV and said, there's just nothing to watch? And you're flipping channels. I mean, that's why we've got 500 channels. I don't even have TV that way. I don't have Dish. I don't have none of that stuff. But we've all said it. Well, the average American adult will spend 2,943 hours in their life searching for something to watch. This is America. This is why, folks, I'm telling you, if you're an adult that's not reading, start reading. Teach your kids. Sit down with your kids and teach them to start reading. Do you know why? There's some really good reasons why you'll read. Number one, that would be the greatest thing you could do to fight Alzheimer's. Exercise your brain. But number two, you'll get out of the habit of going what everyone tells you. And you'll start researching and reading yourself. Actually, if there's a video I'm watching, if they have the option to watch the video or they have the script, I read the script every time. I'd rather read the script 10 to 1 as watch a video. Because I want to learn. I don't learn it by listening, I learn it by reading. That's for me. The next one is we are absolutely drowning in debt. The average American is in credit card and other loans $92,727 of consumer debt. I don't know exactly how they factored all this, but the average household debt is $155,000. The average mortgage debt is $300,000. Comes to a total of $16 trillion personal debt. That's not counting our nation's debt. We are dying, and the Bible is very clear that the borrower will become slave to the lender. Who are we slave to? Well, Federal Reserve for sure. China, Japan. I mean, just start naming the countries. We owe everybody. Anybody that gives $1, we owe them. This one says, if you have $10 and no debt, then you're richer than 15% of the American people. 15% of Americans, their net worth is equal to or less than zero. 69% have less than $1,000 in savings, and 45% have no savings at all. You don't think that if we start getting hungry, the government's going to look really good when we don't have nothing to fall back on? A degrading infrastructure. 10% of our bridges, 55,000, need to be repaired right now. Between it and the roads, they're saying over $2 trillion over the next 10 years need to be spent. Even though that sounds like a lot of money, but it's not a lot compared to today. We are spending $500 billion a year in our interest that we owe on our national debt. The U.S. has the highest poverty rate of any of the 26 developed countries. The highest. Our poverty rate is higher than any of the other developed countries in the world. When has this happened? Our homeless, we have the most homeless number. And most people say this number is extremely low, but 1.5 million people will sleep outside on a bench or on the ground every single night. And most people believe that is a very, very low number. And here's the thing. Even though we have the highest poverty, we still have a lot of wealth. And then to even make that worse, these states that have the highest homeless are also the state that carry the most wealthiest people. Do you know what that's a sign of? America is quickly changing to a third world country. I'm sure even Jaime could tell you something coming out of Venezuela. And everybody knows what happened over there. And one thing that he told me that I'll never forget is the people said it would never happen. People in America said it will never happen. Folks, it's not only it's not going to happen, it's happening as we speak. The largest prison population, 724 people for 100,000 are in prison, 6 times greater than Europe. China has 118 people per 100,000 in prison. We have 2.2 million people behind bars. America has 22% of the prison population of the world, while we only have 4% of the world population. And then I'm going to end it with these two, because these are the two that should really get us. Our freedom. We say that we're the freest nation in the world. 20 years ago, we wasn't the freest nation in the world. Today, we rank out of 180 countries, we rank number 42. We've dropped 20 points in the last 20 years. Freedom, because the pillars of how they gauge the freedom of a nation is the press and our speech. These are the pillars of a free society. So on number 15, and I don't want you to answer. I don't want you to answer because I don't want you to embarrass yourself if you get it wrong. So I just don't want you to answer. 50% of all Americans do not know all of the First Amendment freedoms. Now think about it. You might get 3 of them, but there's 5. If we don't even know what our First Amendment freedoms cover, how in the world can we call ourselves free? We call ourselves free because the powers that be keep telling us we're free. When's the last time they took something off of Facebook that you put on there? When's the last time they took something off of YouTube? When's the last time they put you in Facebook jail? The social media, if you haven't figured it out, I don't even know if we would rank number 42 or not. But so that you can say this church knows the First Amendment, the freedoms that are covered in the First Amendment are religion, speech, press, the freedom to assemble, and also where we can petition. I think the First Amendment says something like to petition the government for redress of grievances. In other words, if you have a problem and you have a complaint, you can complain to the government without fear that they will come after you. Those are the 5 freedoms found in our First Amendment. That's why they're constantly being attacked. And the reason they're attacking the Second Amendment is because if they ever get the Second Amendment, they'll surely take the first. And if you don't know what the second one is, that's the right to bear arms. And that right to bear arms, I'm just going to tell you, doesn't mean the right to go out here and hunt. That means to stand up and fight any evil government, even our own government, when the tyranny that right now America should be causing this government to step back. I'm not calling for us to go to war, but I'm telling you this is why it's there. It's not there so we can hunt. That's why it's wrong. I don't care what your opinion is on an AR, a tactical weapon. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. We're not a nation of opinions. We're a nation of a republic and a constitutional law. But we just watched both sides of this agree to some of these red flag laws, which now means if they just think you're doing something, they can come without due process and do whatever they please to do to you. See, it's nothing, but it's a sin has become reproach to its people. We turned our back on God, and God has turned us over to ourselves. Now, I don't even need to say any more other than, 75% of the people don't know the First Amendment. 25% has no idea what you're even talking about if you say the Bill of Rights. So do you see a deep contrast between this and what I did at the beginning? What I done at the beginning, understood why God would bless us, and this stuff is nothing but symptomatic of we've cast God aside. The churches have so now churches are upset over Roe v. Wade. Pastors are upset, and Trump needs to go to jail for January the 6th. Glenn Beck. Anybody ever heard of Glenn Beck? Now, when Glenn Beck starts talking about some things when it comes to religion and churches, it's getting pretty bad. But he said, I was seeing some churches and then listening and hearing them talking. He said, folks, they need to put some signs up at these churches. He said, one church, I walked in and sat down, and the pastor said, well, first of all, I don't believe in God. But if there is a God, then he should be worshiped. Glenn said, they should put a sign outside on the church sign saying, the pastor doesn't believe in God. But we've got churches in Knoxville that will go into the bars and buy the first drink so they can invite you to come to church. I don't care where your opinion is on alcohol, but I'm just telling you that just ain't right. And you heard me right. When I really don't care, my English gets much worse. That just ain't right. Because I'm getting just a little bit repressive, and I'm a little bit bold and a little bit angry. So I just didn't want to mess my language up. I don't curse. So how I curse, I just obliterate the English language. I mean, I'm listening to him talk on David Letterman. It's been years ago, and he had a guest there, and that guest looked at David Letterman and said, "Jeet yet?" He said, "What?" And I knew exactly what she said. I said, "But I talk like that all the time." Because she said, basically what she's saying, "Have you eaten yet?" She said, "Jeet yet?" We have a tendency of putting all one syllable. We can, for lack of a better term, can really cuss without cussing and never use the first bad word. Because you don't even have a clue what we're saying. But this nonsense really drives me there. I'll be honest with you, I'm angry. I'm angry over what's happening in the United States of America. And I don't know, I've told the Lord, whatever I need to do, I'm willing to do it. I don't care where I need to go, what I need to do. You open the door, you give the platform, I'll go do it. Because at least if nothing changes, I can say that it went away, but it went away with me trying. With me still practicing we the people of these United States of America. Yes, thank God for America, and singing those songs just makes, I mean, if it doesn't bring chills all over you, I don't know if you're a patriot or not. And then to see where we are today, I'm going to tell you, it just infuriates me. We talked in Sunday school about, you know, these high priests. They're just men. You know, they had their mistakes. Let me tell you something. This is a pastor that's got his problems too. And if you want to see some of my problems and see me get in the flesh a little bit, you just come around and we start talking about this stuff. Because I don't get a bit happy about it. And I probably say some things that I shouldn't say. I may never say the first cuss word. I don't cuss, never have. But I will say things that are not nice, and I don't care what the Lord would have to do to some of these people. I just don't care. We'd be a better country without them, is what I would say. And the Bible tells me that I should be praying for these people. So, this is where we're at. Maybe something will stir inside of you, get you angry enough to get up off the couch and go to work and do something. And do not cower back because they start spewing threats. The Bible says we are not people, that we don't have the spirit of fear. But we have the Holy Spirit walking with us as our guide and protector. We don't have to worry about what the United States government will do or what they won't do. We need to worry what God will do and what He won't do. So yes, on this 246th celebration of the United States, yes, I want you to enjoy tomorrow. But then you need to forget about the celebration and go to work. This is where we're at. I mean, I'm reading things. I understand the supply chain. People are so unhappy because their 4th of July barbecue, they're not going to have all the chicken that they really wish they had. Are you kidding me? Or I can't go and do this, or I can't go here. Are you joking me? Those are not problems. Teenage pregnancy is a problem. Where debt to the lenders is a problem. We're just spending 3,000 hours just trying to figure out something to watch, let alone 78,000 hours watching it. And nobody's reading. If your child isn't reading the book, they're not reading the Bible. Oh, they may pick it up and read a verse or two, but they're not reading the Bible. And if the Lord tarries, we're going to see a generation that will be nothing but heathens when it comes to the Word of God. May it not be named among our young people. That's not my job. And that's surely not the school's job. That's your job. Let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you